I'm so excited to be talking with Yordanos Eyoel today. She is an Ethiopian-American democracy entrepreneur who's the founder and CEO of Keseb. Keseb is a nonpartisan organization building a transnational civil society ecosystem to advance inclusive and resilient democracies. She's also a Ashoka Fellow, a civil society fellow of the Aspen Institute, a Highland leader, and a recipient of several awards, including from the Elevate Prize Foundation and Unorthodox Philanthropy. There's so many things to say about you, and I'm so grateful to have you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Lisa.
So let's start with your leadership journey. Can you share with us how you ended up where you are? What was that journey like?
The journey that I'm on, I can't say it's one that I mapped out. And so I would say it's a combination of openness as well as some strategic choices. And also as a Christian, I think really following the kind of the call that I felt on my life at different moments. And so coming out of college, or even when I was in college, I really, well, even I think going way back, I always knew that I wanted to do something to create impact. I come from a family that was always committed to social justice, public service, just really doing something to make the world a better place. And so that is the value system that I grew up with. And I saw people in my life, from my grandfather to my mom to my extended family, really lean into that in different ways. And so for me, I think my metric for success wasn't necessarily money, although it is important. It was, how do I contribute positively to the world? And when I was in college, I naturally thought, I had moved from Ethiopia. I was born in Ethiopia. I had moved to Florida and I went to school in Florida. And I thought, oh, I really want to work globally, and looked at kind of international development opportunities, looked at also as a student of political science and economics, more traditional political career paths in DC. And ultimately, after exploring both of those, decided that actually neither was the right path for me, at least at that particular juncture of my career. And so when I went to graduate school, got introduced to the idea of social entrepreneurship. And that really grabbed my attention because it combined various things that I was interested in. Again, how do we make the world a better place, but bringing in an innovation lens. And so that led me to a career in venture philanthropy, which was something I didn't even know. I didn't even know those two words existed, right? I had heard of philanthropy, but the idea of venture philanthropy was definitely not a concept I was familiar with. That's really where I like to say I grew up as a professional. And now, after supporting entrepreneurs for many years, I felt called to become an entrepreneur to address some of the core systemic issues we face, both in this country as well as globally, around building inclusive and resilient democracy. So today, I do work at the intersection of philanthropy and practice, continuing to bring those lessons and innovations from the venture philanthropy space, but also merging that with other approaches, whether that be from think tanks or network building. So my career trajectory, as I said, was not this linear path where I thought, oh, okay, I'm going to go to school and then I'm going to become an entrepreneur. I'm going to go to school or get into philanthropy. But it's a series of choices that I made that led me to where I am.
Yordanos, I want to talk about this path because reading and listening to you share, it sounds like it's quite thoughtful. University of Florida, Harvard Kennedy School, going to New Profit. And I didn't mention here that you're the first person in the organization's 22-year history to grow from portfolio analyst to managing partner. I mean, what an achievement. So to me, as I listen to you, and it doesn't sound to you like it's a linear path, it just sounds so thoughtful. I'm curious, as someone who is listening from the outside and who wants to follow and wants to find say I was in my 30s, I'm trying to find a similar path. What would you say to me in terms of how to know or how to find direction, given there are so many options, and yet we might not have connections to people to know even what's possible? What would you say to help me and narrow down and get more clear?
You have to know what is the thing at the end of the day that makes you you, right? Not the role you occupy, but you, the unique individual that you are. What is the thing that makes you wake up in the morning, that makes you do the things that you want to do? So I think getting clarity around that is really important because often I think we try to identify that in a role or even an industry or an issue area. And I don't think that is quite the right answer. The reason I say that is because on the journey that I've had, I've had different thematic focus areas, right? So when I entered venture philanthropy, I was working on education related themes. And that's not something I studied in school. That's not something that I ever thought I would be interested in, right? But once I got into it, my my drive was to create impact, right? And so that just became the issue area vehicle through which I could do that in that particular moment. Now, I could have easily shut myself down and say like, okay, this is not the issue area that I thought I would be working on, right? But it was through the lens of again, what made me tick, what I cared about. And I brought that in a sense of curiosity. And that enabled me actually to explore various things under the umbrella of education, including building, informing, and equipping parents from underserved communities to be advocates for their children's education, et cetera. Like it got me connected to education organizers that had come out of labor organizing, which is very much adjacent to the type of civic work that I do today. And so you just never know how the dots are going to connect. And so if somebody is trying to basically say, okay, Lisa took this path, I'm just going to replicate that. That is your path, right? That doesn't necessarily mean it's my path, but I think it's being clear about what makes you tick, your values, being open to possibilities, not restricting yourself to roles or things that or only things that you're familiar with or you think are interest areas today, but just really being open to explore things because you have no idea where they're going to lead you as long as they're aligned with your values. So that's what I would say, that it's not about copying and pasting playbooks. It's about identifying, okay, what are those pieces that or commonalities that have led people to be successful or chart their path, and then trying to figure that out for yourself.
Can you talk about Yordanos, the influence of others on your journey? I imagine that as you were learning, it wasn't just in school or even finding out about venture philanthropy, it was also the people around you. I happen to know that you're a people-oriented person. So can you talk about maybe if there was a specific person or a couple of people who influenced you?
Oh my gosh, so many. I was deeply influenced by my grandfather, who it's kind of the classic African story of had to travel, miles to get to school, right? And didn't have access to many things, right? Like running water, was really living in rural Ethiopia, he was studying at night with a lamp, right? And so just hearing that, and he went to college, and then his career progressed in public service, ultimately being the architect of the adult literacy program in Ethiopia that brought literacy to millions of Ethiopians, most of whom I think it was about 50% were women. So I was deeply inspired by his journey and what he's committed his life to. My mother, who's a journalist and who's always worked to serve her community in various ways. And so, those were, I think, the kind of early in childhood, those were the people I was shaped by. And then as I progressed through school, I mean, there were so many mentors, but also peers, right? Like that challenged my point of view, or like that introduced me to new things, new experiences. And then I would say professionally, New Profit is where I grew up. And so I absolutely have to credit Vanessa Kirsch, who founded and led New Profit for 25 years, to really not only in creating New Profit and a vibrant organization like New Profit, but also the mentorship and guidance and the opportunities that she personally provided me, as well as the incredible, colleagues and mentors I had while I was there, from Kim Simon to Liz Riker to so many other people. And now Tulane Montgomery, who is at the helm. And so many people that I think that I met on New Profit that really shaped my worldview and also how I approach the work that I do, that I have to credit. And other people, I've done fellowships. So Aspen has had a really big influence on me, particularly transitioning from as I was saying, from supporting entrepreneurs to becoming an entrepreneur myself. So the Civil Society Fellowship and yeah, just so many other groups that have been so supportive of me as a person, as well as the vision that I was trying to birth and bring to life. And mentors that have been on the journey with me since literally I was an analyst. So my coach, Diana Smith. So anyway, so numerous people to name, but I am very grateful for the types of relationships that I've been able to cultivate over the course of my career.
I love that there are so many people that you credited, starting from your grandfather and going to, and you named a lot of women actually through your,
Yeah, I
and not
know.
to say that there weren't amazing men, but it's great to hear how much there is influence on the female side. You had
Totally.
mentioned earlier your faith, and I'm wondering is how has that helped shape your career, your decisions? What has it meant to you?
Um, it's been a huge anchor in my life. I was born in an Orthodox Christian family, not necessarily very religious, but also not culturally Christian, meaning that like we were, there was enough of an understanding of our faith, but I think a combination of that and then going to an all girls Catholic school where I did have structured classes on to really understand the faith and kind of the pillars of what make up our faith system, right? That I think that really gave me the foundation because I was brought up in this context where I'm in a Christian household, I'm going to a Christian school and learning about what that all entails. That doesn't necessarily mean that I had full understanding of what it meant to be a Christian. That did not happen until I was 25. But the reason I mentioned that is because I had that foundation and I think I took it as just the way things were. Like it was just my reality. And I think when I got to high school, I really started questioning, is this something that I inherited or is this something that is actually my own? And I think I didn't quite have an answer for that, but I really appreciate being in a family that gave me the space to be able to do that kind of exploration on my own. That did not pressure me to say you have to follow this faith because that's what we believe in, but let's just give you some time to ask the questions that you need to ask of yourself. And it's really in my mid 20s that I really came back to my faith and realized that no, this is actually something that I believe in. And I think particularly as a leader, it is so important to be anchored in something, because you don't always know the right answers. You don't, there's so many distractions. And particularly as a woman, there's so many things coming at you, right? And a woman of color also. And so I think for me, it's been really important for me to be the type of person and leader that I am, but also aspire to be grounded in my faith. And again, coming back to values, purpose, all of that really stem from um, the faith that I have, but also the foundation that I think my upbringing provided me.
Yordanos, do you talk about your faith in with your team, or is that something you keep to yourself? I'm curious if there's a separation or how do you integrate, if anything?
Yeah, I don't lead a faith-based organization. I think for a very long time, as a professional, like most other aspects of my identity, it wasn't information I volunteered, right? And I also think that in a lot of, I mean, I'm on the East Coast, a lot of elite liberal circles. It's not, I mean, no one has ever explicitly said anything to me about disapproving Christians, but I think there is a sense that, like, that perhaps it's not the most welcoming thing, or the most welcomed thing to talk about. And so I think for a long time, I felt like um, I couldn't be as forthcoming about different parts of my identity, faith being one of them, unless I felt particularly safe in an environment. It wasn't something I was intentionally trying to hide. It just wasn't something that again, as I said, that I voluntarily spoke about. But I think as I've become more confident in myself and also the role that it provides, as I said, in terms of making sure that I am anchored in a set of values, um, I've gotten more comfortable sharing that with people. So it's not something I talk about on a daily basis, but it is something that I think most people who work with me and interact with me are familiar with. And I think I'm at a stage in my career where I feel comfortable doing that, but that was certainly was not the case when I was much younger. So I think you also have to find the right balance, but that's how I manage it today.
Jordanis, you had said earlier that when you were in your 20s, you had asked questions. And I'm curious, did you go on a journey where you were traveling the world or did you journal a lot? Like, what were the questions that you're asking? And how did you actually realize, actually, this is something I believe in? What was that life journey like for you?
Yeah, it was grad. I mean, I was finishing up grad school. Up until that point, everything was very clear, right? Meaning I still had to work hard, I had to do things, but the steps are much easier to figure out. Uh, and then you get to the end of grad school and I'd been in school for a really long time at that point, and it's like, okay, what is the next thing? And I was in the midst of applying for jobs and thinking about career and all of these big life questions. So what does this mean? What does this all add up to? And it's in those, I think, moments of struggle and identity formation that I started reading a set of books, faith-based books, that I think helped me really understand who I am and kind of in the context of the world and my purpose. I don't think I had an articulation. I have a greater sense of my purpose today than I did when I was 25. But I think the seeds were definitely planted in those moments of like real questioning, real angst about my next steps, and feeling pressure also around what does success mean after this, right? And uh, and I think I was really struggling with that because once you get out of school, those metrics are less defined for you. And I think that was a moment of catalyst for me.
Jordanis, I have to ask this question. What is your definition of success at your age now?
It's such a great question. I think it's what I aspire to contribute in the world, which is to live a life of service and um, to accomplish all that I was created to do. And which is so different from person to person, but
Mhm.
for me, it's like continuing to lean into the sense of purpose, the purpose that I feel for my life, and then making sure that I'm following that path to the very end. I think for me that is and to do that with in cognizant of kind of the relationships that I'm cultivating and kind of the basically what I try to mean is that like often when we talk about purpose, sometimes it sounds like just a career move.
Mhm.
But for me, I think about it in a more holistic fashion. Like, what is this path that I'm on ultimately intended to lead me to, and trying to get to that destination with as many people coming along with me as possible. Yeah, I think that's how I think about success today.
So great. Jordanis, this has been wonderful. Are you ready for lightning round questions?
Yes.
Chocolate or vanilla?
Oh, vanilla.
Cooking or takeout?
Takeout.
Climb a mountain or jump from a plane?
Oh my gosh. Neither.
Have you ever worn socks with sandals?
Socks with sandals? Not like outside of my house.
How would you rate your karaoke skills on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being Mariah Carey?
Uh, like two.
What's a book you've read, either recently or even when you were 25, if you remember one of the books that had shaped your views on the world?
Um, I really like, I mean, there's so many books, but I keep coming back to the book Switch.
Hmm.
I read it in my late 20s, but I go back to it occasionally as a refresher. I mean, to refresh my memory. And it's pretty good. I highly recommend it. It's about how to think in a much more complex way to address problems, and it's super accessible and practical.
What is your favorite way to practice self-care?
Definitely yoga and Pilates are my go-to, but lately I've been incorporating a lot more quiet time, which is something that I think I had grossly undervalued in my life up until this moment. But now I'm realizing is something I likely cannot live without because there's so much noise and chaos in the world that I think being able to find moment of solitude and quiet is it feels like actually luxury.
What is a good professional development you've done?
Like a program or a
Anything,
professional
any,
step.
yeah, professional, could be a fellowship,
Um,
it could be a class.
yeah, I definitely having a coach, coach and mentor. I mean, that is one of a leader that I respect. John Rice at MLT talks about how when you're a professional athlete, you have to have a trainer, you have to have a coach, right? And that's not something that you even think about. It's automatic. And so why would we think differently when we're trying to do extraordinary things, accomplish big things, solve big problems, right? And I think it's often something that's deeply undervalued and something that I credit New Profit with, which is that the importance of providing mentorship and coaching at all to people at all stages of their career. So often we think about coaching as something that becomes valuable when in a leadership position, but it's actually something that's helpful when you're starting out your career, when you're in the middle of your career. Sometimes it's even more important there because you're setting the foundation. So that's something that I wholeheartedly believe in and something that I've committed to providing to my team as well as a whole, because it has had such a huge impact on me.
What advice would you give your younger self?
Um, it will be okay. Because I think I've worked really hard, but there were also lots of stressful moments over the course of my career. And I think, yeah, it's okay to take it easy sometimes.
And then where can we find you, like LinkedIn, anywhere else?
Yeah, LinkedIn is really the best way to find me.
And then last question, do you have a final ask, recommendation, or parting thoughts to share?
One of the things, particularly because you are focused on equipping young women of color to be successful in their career. It was an advice that a friend of mine gave me a few years ago that really stuck with me. And they said, you always have something to contribute, but you have nothing to prove. And that was really that really stuck with me and I really appreciate it. That doesn't necessarily mean that maybe, skill wise or competency wise, et cetera, we all have to, or you have an idea and you have to prove it out, right? So it's not in that sense, like there's still rigor and excellence, but it's a sense of like, as a human being, right? I have nothing to prove. And so even when I'm testing things out, those are just ideas, those are just skills that I'm demonstrating, I'm learning. It's not about who I am fundamentally. And I think that was really, it was comforting to hear. And it's something that I often think about, particularly in those moments when I am afraid of failure, or I feel, I experience rejection, or I feel disrespected, whatever. It's like, okay, that is not taking away from who I am, right? And just continually reminding myself of that has been really helpful to me. So I wanted to share that with you and your audience as well.
I love that and so appreciate you sharing because we need those reminders. We need those reminders. And I'm glad that you got it early in your career and that you're helping to remind us all, even me, like, oh
We
man,
all
pay
need it.
attention. Yordanos, thank you so much for these stories, the advice, the practical take-home lessons that we can all learn from. I so appreciate you and your time.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a huge honor.